Hi, I'm Dan with US Muscle Mods, and today we're at STS Turbo with Rick Squires, the owner. And we're going to talk a little bit about the remote mounted turbo systems. And Rick, could you tell us a little bit first about the company and what goes along with it?
Well, about 6 years ago I started STS. I'd done a lot of supercharging, a lot of turbocharging, lots of nitrous, that kind of stuff. So I was very familiar with the problems associated with all of those and the benefits associated with all of them. And the turbos are always the big power makers. It's there all the time, you know, fill your bottle, and it's the best of both worlds. You get lots of fuel mileage and lots of big nasty power. The downside was always trying to figure out how to fit it in there without having to relocate everything, without catching, you know, your plastic on fire, without, you know, just causing yourself a lot of grief. So, you know, one day I was doing a truck, and actually it was kind of weird because we kind of want to go with a sleeper, and it's pretty hard to pop the hood and see a big turbo sitting there and have it be a sleeper. And
yeah.
So I started looking at, well, maybe we could put it, you know, put it down underneath, down a little lower, and I saw the muffler on the thing was just huge. I was like, man, let's stick it in the muffler, and we'll hide it in there. We'll run another pipe up, and nobody will ever know. And then that's how it started. It's like, well, okay, it'll work, but how are we going to get the thing to oil? And that was the big issue, and it took a long time to get the oiling system to work. But that's how once we got it all done, that's how the company was started. It's like, you know, we've solved all the problems of turbocharging a vehicle. If we can put the turbo wherever we want it and get it downstream so it doesn't make so much heat in the engine bay, after the catalyst, you don't have your emissions problems. It just, everything is win-win about it, and that's how the company got started.
Great. So let's talk about a few of the differences that you've mentioned between the under-the-hood turbocharging and the remote-mounted turbochargers. You mentioned that there's a lot of heat that gets generated. What are some of the downsides to that? I mean, and also, you know, like you had mentioned, having to move stuff just to make everything fit.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, 20 years ago it wasn't that big a deal, 20, 30 years ago. But, you know, as time's gone on, you just don't end up with all this extra room like you do on a 68 Chevelle or something. You take a new car today, and there's no room in there. If there was some room, they either put something in it or they got rid of it and made the car smaller and tighter and lighter. And so there's just, you know, if you start wanting to put a piece of metal in there that's this big, that gets 2,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit, and you stick it under a hood of a new car, I mean, everything out of it is plastic, and, you know, consequently, you're going to have problems. The GM, their new ZR1, it was supposed to be turbocharged. It was twin turbo. That's how it started. And the GM engineers got it all set up and working, and they caught that car on fire multiple times, and finally they scrapped it, and they said, put a supercharger on it. You know, why they didn't call us, I don't know.
Well, that'll change.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there's definitely a difference. Turbos are turbos. They work on the same principles, but when you've got it under the hood, it just acts a little differently than when you start moving it downstream a little bit. The reason they give off so much heat is the radius on that scroll on the turbo is only about this big, and the velocity of that air coming out of there is like shooting a 30-06 shell and having it skip around the corner there. I mean, the friction around the outside is insane, and that's why those turbine housings just glow yellow, white. I mean, you can see right through them when they're really hot. And so that's why that is so hot. You take, you know, exhaust that's already, you know, 1,500, 2,000 degrees, and then you crank it around that corner and put that friction into it, and have it all packed against that metal. Well, that metal pulls the heat out, and where does it end up? It ends up under your hood. So, and that's another reason that they have a hard time passing emissions. Turbo cars, front mount anyway, typically have a hard time. So much heat comes out of the turbine housing that you don't have much left when it goes down the downpipe down to your cats. The cats don't come online very well. But,
so by mounting the turbos in the back of the car, they're obviously going to run cooler, which is going to be better for the turbo because it's not going to get so hot. It's going to be better for all the components around it because they're not going to get so hot. But I know you guys also claim that you have the highest power per pound of boost in the industry. What goes into effect with that?
Yeah, well, heat is bad. Any way you look at it, heat is your number one enemy, and it's amazing what a turbo can go through. And you watch one on a dyno, it fires up, it runs up, the thing turns almost white hot, and then you shut it down, and the thing's still hotter and hot for half an hour, and you start it up, and it actually works again. It's amazing that the bearings and the oil and stuff can survive that. But so heat's your number one enemy. Our turbos run about 500 degrees cooler than they are up front. They're not cold by any means. It's the difference between 12 to 1500 degrees versus 1500 to 2000 degrees. So and that's a big difference on your oil as far as cooking your oil. So heat's also robs energy on the intake side. So the exhaust side is one thing. The intake side, anytime you compress air, it gets hot, and you're putting work into it, and it raises the temperature. While the temperature goes up, you put hot air into your engine, it expands, and it doesn't have the density that cold air does. That's why your car runs so much better in the wintertime on a cold night than it does out here today when it's 90 degrees out. So horsepower equals horsepower comes from having cold air and having a lot of it. And so if you're heating the air up, even if you're putting more of it in, some of that is kind of a wash. So the nice thing about the remote stuff is the turbo is so much cooler that it doesn't induce some of that heat into it to begin with. Where we're usually pulling air from somewhere out of the engine bay, so it comes into the turbo cooler. It doesn't get heated up as much from the heat of the turbo. And then we've got our charge pipes that run outside the engine bay, which are just like a big long intercooler without really the restriction of an intercooler. And so we get about a 50% intercooler efficiency out of just the tubing. That's why we can run some of our systems and they don't come with an intercooler. You can get it and they make great power and they work really well, especially for a 5, 6, 7 pound boost kit. You can have pretty decent intake temps, a lot lower than like a root style supercharger, way lower than that. And they make really good power. As soon as we put an intercooler on, now we're putting pretty cool air into an intercooler. Instead of shoving 250 degree air into your intercooler, you're only putting 140 degree air into your intercooler. So it comes out the other end at just about ambient. And that's where we get the big horsepower per pound boost. Some of our Corvettes, our standard stuff, we can get 35 horsepower per pound boost really easy. On some of the stuff where we're really pushing it, I've seen 50 horsepower per pound boost on some of these cars.
Wow.